So coming up next is a spotlight from the Innovator. We had several spotlights, view from the farmer. We're going to continue with the view from the Innovator. It's my pleasure to introduce Matt Crisp, President and CEO of Benson Hill. He's no stranger to this audience, his company having come out of the Danforth innovation space and being a local boy. So in addition to being an entrepreneur and launching a successful company and making great use of Ag Innovation Showcase, which we're very proud of, Matt's also a thinker about disruption in his space, and he has just pivoted his company, and he's going to kind of share that insight with us and what that means perhaps for innovation in the whole Ag Innovation space. So Matt, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So earlier this year, Rohit asked me to speak, and at the time he said precisely what Claire just offered. I'd like you to come and share a little bit about Benson Hill and about how you've broadened the focus of the company. And then late one night, a few weeks after that, after a particularly challenging evening putting two young children to bed, I got an email and said, no, we don't want you to talk about Benson Hill. We want you to talk about innovation. And we want you to think, help people think through innovation and your perspective of innovation in agriculture. And many of you know me and know that I'm not technically trained. I have no science background or engineering degree. And the thought first that crossed my mind was, why would I be qualified to talk about this? I shared last night with someone that did take astronomy in college, and that was my lab science. And I, prior to that, did take 10th grade chemistry, and got a D. But in all seriousness, innovation, and particularly what it means in a more broad sense, deserves discussion. And we talk about Ag Innovation Showcase, we talk about innovation in our industry, but sometimes we don't pause and think about what that really means. And so I began to think a little bit more about the impact of what this term embodies and the opportunity that uniquely exists, in my opinion, today in agriculture to do something that's very significant. So the perspective I'm going to offer you is that of a former investor that focused on life sciences and that turned into an ag tech entrepreneur. And I'm very passionate about this space and the possibilities. Maybe before launching into that, though, I'd ask the audience, any definitions of innovation? Anybody would just shout out what you think of when you think of innovation. What does that mean?
Doing better.
Doing better. Anybody else?
Something new.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Something new. Creativity. Any other thoughts? Sorry? Right, exactly. And this element, creativity, something new, getting value from science, these coalesce around the most commonly understood and cited definition of innovation, which is a breakthrough. It's an aha moment. It's science, it's technology, it's something new. This is the most common misconception about what innovation really is. Innovation is about value creation. We can talk about the retrospective view of why we in agriculture and in other industries have thought about innovation around science and technology. But I want today for you to bear with me and to focus on more of the prospective view and how perhaps together we can think about how innovation is perceived more broadly. I'll start maybe with a couple examples. The most impactful, revolutionary company in the modern automobile industry, Tesla, is a terrific example of a company that has totally changed the way that we're thinking about, in some respects, transportation, but specifically the hardware of how we get from point A to point B and how we use energy. But what it surprised you to know, there in that car are 14 moving parts, that's it. And that you or I, 10 years ago, could have bought all of them. In fact, we could have bought all of the parts to make a Tesla online or at a hardware store. Dollar Shave Club, anybody heard of that? Another great example, couple fans. You know, this is a company that changed the way that customers experienced a brand, the way they interact with a brand. It's something as simple as men's razors and wipes, right? So you've got Tesla on say, call it the back end, right? And the way that operationally it's configured. You've got Dollar Shave Club. Another one is Dell, a little bit more dated example, Dell Computer, which changed the way that the computer industry was really structured and the way that we thought about technology and access to it. And they didn't do it because they came up with some hot, slick new computer. They simplified dramatically the experience that we had in making a tough decision and in what was previously a very complicated purchasing experience, right? Most people thought that these companies were, they were nuts. And there's some really well-documented accounts of their early fundraising. As you might imagine, there's some pretty hilarious discussions about it. But very little is truly new. The biologist Francisco Redi famously stated that every living thing comes from a living thing. And that philosophy, I'll talk for just one moment about Benson Hill, that philosophy is really what Benson Hill was founded on. We formed Benson Hill to tackle photosynthesis. Right? This is only the backbone of all living organisms. It's only evolved for millennia. It's only been researched for more than 50 years. We didn't set out to rediscover photosynthesis. We set out to understand how we could use tools and technology that were uniquely available today to make an impact, to change something that physically and biochemically is actually very inefficient. And many people think, and still do, that we are nuts. And we think the data will speak for itself in the resulting products, but the point is not that, the point isn't specific to our business. It's really that our business isn't a technology business per se. It's a technology-enabled business. And the same thing can be said for those other examples. Innovation is really about creating and delivering value. And this holds true for every industry. And it lies, as I mentioned earlier, in how the business is configured, right? The upstream elements of that, and then how the business interacts with a customer, an end user, or a partner. So it's embodying a core innovation, a core offering. And we're going to hear a little bit more about some of that today. We've got genome editing. That's one great example of a core innovation that holds the opportunity to really transform an industry. And then you've got biologics, you've got precision ag. But if we think again about how the business is configured around those core innovations, how will they be sourced? How will they be monetized? What, if any, partner strategy exists? What does the supply chain look like? These are all a really big deal. These are a really big deal. If you think downstream and you talk about how that is oriented or experienced by or delivered to an end user or a customer, is it through a channel? What does the brand represent? Importantly, how does a customer feel about that product? This is a really big deal. And history would tell us in every other industry that the majority of value, and this is important, the majority of value that's actually created is not around the core innovation. It's around what you do upstream, how you configure your business, and it's how you interface with the customer or the partner or the end user. It's what defines the experience that they have interacting with your core innovation. If there's ever an industry where we need to think very carefully about how we're interfacing with the end user, it's agriculture. We've really failed on the front end. I think, the request was, what is my view on innovation in ag? I think we failed pretty dramatically on the front end. And people who stand up here and say, oh, we just need to speak louder and we just need to tell people that they're just wrong and that has proven itself not to work, and I think we need to look forward and not backwards, right? And with exception, I'd say, of some really terrific innovation in the 1990s, we have also largely failed on the back end in this industry, particularly on both sides of this, again, compared to other industries. R&D is too expensive. Operationally, the barriers to get into it, to do anything impactful, have been high. And they're very, very different 10 years ago than they are today. Today, innovation is really maturing very rapidly. I'm sure we'll hear more about this later today, and we have in some respects already, but consumers are looking for a different kind of food. They're looking to experience their diets in many respects differently. They're looking to get food from crops that haven't historically gotten a lot of research investment. And they're frankly tired of having a handful of companies control or have the perception that a handful of companies control the food chain. It's really the small companies, the companies that are here, companies that are nascent, companies that don't even exist yet but are some idea in somebody's head, that really hold the promise to very rapidly and very cost-effectively innovate in an integrated format. So far, that ambition, the privilege to really do anything like that, has been reserved for the companies with the biggest budgets and the largest organizations. And that just doesn't exist anymore. These barriers are being shattered all over the place. And it's not just, again, about the core innovation and focusing on the product or the service, but truly integrated approaches that will result in more sustainable, longer-term success and more value creation. Some companies that are to watch out for, in my opinion, Agravita, AgBiome, Indigo, Conservice, Midwest BioAg, and to give a large company credit, Syngenta. I think the Enogen program doesn't get enough attention, and it's precisely an example of what we're talking about changing the way that a product is oriented in the market. And I hope we'll see a lot more of this, but these companies are already beginning to execute along these lines. I'll wrap up as just saying there's a window of opportunity, a very unique window of opportunity that exists today. There's more capital pouring into our space than has ever come before. There's more investors and interest and know-how from across industry lines that are available for us to take advantage of. The technology enabling costs are falling like a rock. We have infrastructure access. We're standing in some of it. And I think, interestingly, and we need to look at this through a positive lens, we are in a pretty significant commodity down cycle. It's driving consolidation. We're hearing about it every day. And while that may make some aspects of our business tougher, what it does do is it makes talent more available. There's not a week that goes by I don't have a conversation with somebody that was or is with a large company that wants to start a business. That's saying something. So we're in a sea of resources at this meeting. There are people from all over the ag value chain, food value chain, tons of backgrounds, lots of different experiences. And so I'd ask, just before you leave, come up with one significant, innovative idea and take advantage of the resources that are around us. Test the idea. Despite the misconceptions, innovation is disciplined and it's purposeful. And I hope that you'll join me in thinking boldly about what is beyond the product. And I really believe that if we do, we will make an impact that we can be proud of, that our children and their children can enjoy. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
You said that this time hasn't come forward, there's been so much interest in investing in this. What's driving that investment?
You mean just new dollars coming into the space? I mean, my perception is it's largely driven by the enabling technologies. We've had such an advent of advancement from a cloud infrastructure perspective, from a big data analytics perspective, that investors that historically have focused strictly in the technology realm have looked across to ag as a vertical where there's a legitimate opportunity to monetize these types of technologies. And I think Climate Corp, as many folks in here would probably agree, really catalyzed that thinking. Gee, this is a market that I should probably pay attention to. And so I think that catalyzed a lot of it. I'll just add one more comment to it, though. While I think that was a fantastic and pivotal point in time for our industry, I almost do feel that we've focused so heavily on the technology elements of that, which are translated to people, non-ag people, as precision ag, and not so much on the biology and a lot of the things that help balance that equation and on the farm make an impact. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Great, thank you.
You gave us a lot to think about, Matt. I'm sure we'll be coming up to you throughout the rest of the conference.